The first movie botched the Joker. This movie botched their interpretation of the Joker.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us one of our favorite guests, Andrew Reeder, to review the most recent release in the DC universe, but not the DC universe that just got taken over. It is just a prequel background story for the Joker, Deux, or Deux? Ducks. I don't speak French. Deux. Anyways, Joker 2. And yeah, it's a film. Do I dare? Yeah, sure. It was written by Scott Silver and Todd Phillips and directed by Todd Phillips. Anyways, initial takeaways after having watched this film, Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I wrote this one down because I needed to say it word for word. This movie, I'm not going to read it. Actually, I'm not going to read it. It felt like a fever dream where the person who wrote it got high on meth and cocaine and thought they had an epiphany, but didn't.
Interesting.
That's my takeaway.
That's your takeaway. I mean, if anyone has looked at other reviews, and I try very hard not to, but I did see just briefly that this one is bombing in the box office. So, it's, I guess, somewhat appropriate given, I know Andrew's not going to have a good rating for this one. I also do not have an amazing rating for this one. It's not going to do very well for us. You'll see that in a second. But, I mean, in my opinion, this film committed Harry Carey 3 times. 1, with the music that it did. 2, because of how it destroys the persona of the Joker that was established in the first film. And then 3, it turns out the Joker isn't actually the Joker. Spoiler alert, but we'll get to that later, and if you want to hear why, keep listening. So, anyways, this whole film actually is really destroying everything that stood before it, and even the ideas that it played with, as much as they weren't canon, at the very least, were completely undone in this film. And that's one of the reasons I think that it's a terrible film, even though it tries very hard to do some interesting plot twists. But that all aside, before we get into the details of it, if you really want to watch this film, feel free before you come back to this, but we're not going to stop. Andrew, what is the Joker? I'm just going to call it Joker 2. What is Joker 2 about?
It is the it is the trial of Arthur Fleck. That, like, in a nutshell, it is the long, drawn-out court trial and the many shenanigans that him and Lee Quinzel get up to, and his escapades at Arkham Asylum throughout.
And that's as much as you could give without really revealing a ton, but it's also like, how much is there to reveal, to be honest?
Exactly.
Besides Lee Quinzel is interested in Arthur Fleck's character in a romantic way, which you could see that from the commercial, so that's not really a surprise either. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you took the review, the rating system. What did this one get, Andrew?
So, I'm going to preface this with, I looked up my review of Star Wars Episode 9 after I filled this out. My review of Episode 9 was a 1.5.
And for you who are listening, Andrew is a huge Star Wars fan and absolutely despises Star Wars Episode 9.
I hate that movie. Yes. But
so it got a 1.5?
I never thought anything would surpass that. This movie got a 1.4.
Nice. I'm surprised it got over a 1.
True. I was looking through that, and there were some of the questions where I was like, kind of, but I really don't want to give it to it, because I'm going to give it points, but I need to. And so I gave it to it, and then I was like, dang it got over a 1. Crap.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, my rating was not amazing. That being said, I did give it higher than Andrew did. So for me, it got a total of a 3.4. So this is not within the rewatch realm for me. A 3.4 is pretty terrible. You have to get like above 4.5 to be considered mediocre, in my opinion. So 3.4 is quite bad. That being said, obviously it's higher than a 1.2 or whatever you just gave it.
What Star Wars Episode 9?
I don't remember. That's a good question. I'll look that up right now.
Mine is lower than 9. As long as yours
Mhm.
is within the range of what you gave 9, I'm okay. But
Star Wars Episode 9 got a 1.8 from me.
oh, I will say,
That's actually
I,
crazy. I got a lower review for Star Wars Episode 9 than you did.
no, my review for 9 was 1.5.
Oh, okay. So barely above. Okay, got it.
We were right in the same range, so.
Right. Anyways, yeah, that's what I got. I got a 3.4. You got a 1.2 for this one, correct?
A 1.4. I'm
1.4.
exactly 1 point lower than you.
Yeah, so we both did not like this film, and there are good reasons for that, which we're going to get into today. So let's just start off with how this film opened. You see a cartoon replaying the actions of the first Joker film, and a disembodied form of Arthur Fleck that represents the Joker versus Arthur Fleck in this split personality type situation. What was your impression of how they opened this film and all of the stuff that was involved in reintroducing us to this character?
It was interesting. Like, I wasn't quite sure what they were doing with it, and then they kind of talk about this Joker film that they made in the movie, so I'm assuming that's what they're referring to throughout, is this cartoon that was made. But it's also kind of just like, what is this? Because to me, an opener is supposed to set up what the movie is about, and that opener was just kind of like, okay, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse R-rated edition.
It's funny. I mean, I don't think. I think it was supposed to, yeah, deal with foreshadowing, right? Clearly, the idea that there's two Joker characters there in this one was indicating the idea that Arthur Fleck, does he have split personality disorder or does he not, right? Is he having this issue where there's one part of him that takes over versus the other one that wants to be good, right? And that's a big part of the discussion about the court case is really, is this person insane or are they just a evil person trying to do evil things? And I mean, in that way, I suppose it's interesting, but overall, I thought it was more confusing than anything else. Partially because, as well, frankly, the rest of the film has no real resemblance to the cartoon aspect that we get at the beginning of the film. And
Yeah.
it's very much out of place. And I actually don't think that what you just mentioned about it potentially being the film they were referencing, I didn't get the impression based on watching the film that this fake film about the Joker that was created after the Joker was incarcerated was that cartoon. I believe it was supposed to be some sort of like, you know how Diddy Combs got arrested and then a month later Netflix had a special explaining it? Like, it was one of those type situations, was my understanding.
That's what I assumed, but I'm also kind of like, it wasn't super clear.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's like,
I mean,
I'm not sure which one they're referring to, because to me, I'm trying to rationalize why they would have put that as the opener.
Sure.
And so it's like, that's the only rational thing I can think of, other than, oh, let's recap the last movie. Like, any movie ever does that.
Right. Yeah, you get to the beginning of every single TV show as they explain what just happened in the past previously on The Mandalorian. You know, it was one of those scenes.
Show that'd be so bad.
A cartoon version.
So
Oh
bad.
gosh. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it was one of the worst openings I've seen in a while, personally. I thought it was confusing. I thought it did not add to the plot at all, other than foreshadowing the main plot issue of does he have split personality or not. And that's why it got something from me. But other than that, it was very confusing. And from there, you get the real world, which is Arthur Fleck in his cell at Arkham Asylum, and him being dragged out of his cell, but not laughing, not making jokes, nothing out of the normal that we usually saw in the previous film with Arthur Fleck's character as the Joker. What was your impression of him as a character in this film, especially compared to the previous one?
Oh, I mean, if you've listened to our podcast of the first one, I'm not a huge fan of the first one, but at the same time, like, I can understand that they were trying to tell a story using the character of the Joker. The first movie botched the Joker. This movie botched their interpretation of the Joker. Like, I don't even know what they were doing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can understand they're like, oh, we want to have him be serious for one day, but they gave no rationale. It was just like, today, for some reason, he's serious and doesn't want to make any jokes, which is not within line of the Joker's persona, which was kind of what they were going for at the end of the last movie, is that he's now fully embraced this chaotic, evil character that is the Joker.
Well,
But
they were trying to indicate it, I believe, in that he was taking his drugs, and the drugs sedated him, so he wasn't the same insane person he had been previously. And that was what you got a difference of in this film compared to the previous one, where why is he not insane right now? Because he's taking the pills he's required to take as a part of Arkham Asylum.
yeah,
I don't think it fully explains it though. At least the beginning, if I recall correctly, indicates this was pretty sudden for the Joker to not be making
yeah,
jokes, to not be laughing, and that just doesn't happen overnight if you're taking any sort of medication. Usually the effects are pretty gradual, unless it's, I guess, if it's really potent stuff, it might do something, but
and the
I don't
guards
know.
even they're like,
Right.
oh, jokes today.
Right.
And there's again, it's I think it's very characteristic of the whole movie where there's a lot of sudden shifts that aren't really explained in the character of the Joker specifically, that
Mm-hmm.
just seem erratic and like they're not explained. And like I'll grant you that the Joker is meant to do a lot of things that are not meant to be explained, but the one thing that's consistent about him is his character. Like the
Mm-hmm.
fact that he is always making jokes, he is always laughing, and he is always trying to cause as much chaos as possible.
Correct.
What that chaos is what's unpredictable. But the fact that they kind of extended the chaos into him as a character is where the movie became very disjointed and broken up.
Yeah. And his character, it seems like it's flawed in different ways, very different ways compared to the previous film, which in some ways disjoints it from what we saw previously. Because, like you said, he doesn't have the insanity that we saw in the first one. He doesn't have um, a lot of the same issues. He doesn't even really have the laugh. The laugh shows up little to none in this film compared to the previous film. And his big thing is like he doesn't have a romantic interest in his life. I mean, maybe you could say, "Oh, this film is not really and this might be the correct interpretation. This movie isn't really a action movie or a court movie. It's really a romance movie." And that's part of the problem.
It's everything. That's the problem. They tried to make it everything, and it ended up being nothing. It's like mixing pizza and ice cream into a smoothie and hoping it comes out good.
See, I'm pretty sure someone saw La La Land and was like, "Let's put cigarettes in that. That'll be a great film." And
That
that's
was
what
the
we got.
joke I made at the beginning of the movie. When they were dancing on the rooftop, I
Oh,
said, La
really?
La Land?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, they had a lot of clearly Broadway musical sets that they used for this film, which was another thing. The music was just out of place, and that was one thing I will say that took us out of the movie. Is that the movie was trying to be this big musical number for a theme that frankly wasn't made to be a musical number. But even if they tried to co-opt it into a musical atmosphere. But in each situation, you're not getting a situation where it makes sense for the characters to be singing. Even though they're like, oh, he's insane, he's just imagining this in his mind. But at the same time, every time he was singing, it took you out of the film, took you out of the tension, took you out of the plot, and instead you're thinking, why is he singing right now? And also, frankly, I'm sorry, Joaquin Phoenix, you're not a great singer.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know that he was supposed to be a singer, but
Well, yeah, maybe.
um, but yeah, the music sucked. I'm not a fan of musicals. This took all the things I'm not a fan of, put them on steroids, put them on a screen in front of me for what felt like 14 hours of garbage.
Yeah, it was. It's just, and this is easily turning into a browbeating, and I don't want it to necessarily turn into that. But I think that the point is that this film was trying to do something different, right? Trying to do something unique, especially in regards to the music that we listen to, and to the main character, right? Instead of this being oh, this is about a insane guy. It's about, okay, how does this insane man find love? And the concept in and of itself sounds interesting for a romance. Yeah, you don't really see movies about people who are insane finding love. So maybe that could be compelling. The problem is that they tried to use established IP to do it, and the way they played it out was far below subpar. So, not a lot of problems, and one of them is the music, because it actively destroys any progress they make in regards to building a plot. So that was an important, I guess, aside. But in regards to Arthur Fleck's character, what did you think of him as he develops, especially as he develops around this character of Lee Quinzel, who's supposed to be this precursor Harley Quinn type persona? What were your thoughts on that relationship? Because clearly it's like a quote unquote driving force of this film.
Yeah. I think, one, for anyone who's going to see this movie and is a fan of DC Comics and like understands the character of the Joker and Harley Quinn, this movie botched those characters in the first movie, and the second movie does the same thing. They go a completely different route with both of them, and sometimes going a different route is fine. I think in this case of this movie, it doesn't work to their betterment because the character of Harley Quinn, as a side character, one who's supposed to drive um, Arthur's character along in this plot, she doesn't really do that, other than the fact that at the very beginning of the movie, he gets this love interest. But there are certain things that she does, and then Arthur's reactions to those things that don't make any sense. Like the fact that she just straight up lies to him about everything, and it does nothing for him. Like, it should have caused him to start to question her, but instead he's just like, oh, whatever, brushes it off. And it isn't until like the last 5 minutes of the movie where it's like, oh, his world comes crashing down, sort of thing. Which doesn't really add to the tension of the plot or to the character development of Arthur, because at that point in the movie, we're wrapping things up. And so I think her character is just like, what are her motives? What is driving her? I mean, she's psychotic already, which is an interesting take on Harley Quinn, because she's not meant to be psychotic, from what I understand. She's meant to be a psychiatrist that is attending to the Joker in Arkham Asylum, and those sessions are what drive her to the point of insanity. She like becomes obsessed with the Joker because of that. And they like have hints of that where they say that she went to school to study psychology. But she's already pretty much an insane individual going into this movie. And another stark difference is that normally the Joker is the one playing Harley Quinn. Like, she is just a pawn in his game. This movie very much makes the Joker a pawn in Harley Quinn's game. She is very much the manipulator behind the scenes when it comes to Arthur's character. I don't know. I'm not a fan of her character. I don't know that she adds a ton to this movie, other than she's a love interest and then she isn't. So I don't know what unique benefit we get from having Harley Quinn as a character as the love interest when we're already breaking away from the norm that was the Joker as an established character from previous literature.
Well, I would say that Harley Quinn's character is actually pretty critical to this film. And you see that because I think the callbacks to La La Land, as cheesy as it is actually intentional by the creators of this film. That they wanted you to be in the mindset that this is a musical about a love interest, but this is different from La La Land because these people are insane. And that is at the same time part of the problem, because you're dealing with two insane people, and it's very hard to relate to two insane people. And now they do undo the idea of insanity later in this film, but early on it's almost like the path they try to give themselves is, oh, for example, Arthur Fleck trusting Harley Quinn makes sense because he's insane, even though a normal person wouldn't trust her after she clearly just lied to him. It's almost like this idea of insanity is supposed to be the pass you get for saying, no, they're still in love because they're crazy. But then you, as an audience, don't relate or empathize with these characters because they're not going through a realistic struggle. They're just crazy people doing crazy things, like falling for people that they shouldn't fall for, and no normal person would if their first interaction with them was a lie. So I think that was part of the problem with just introducing them right off the bat is the trust that it's established is disingenuine and on its outset cannot be trusted. So as beyond that, I actually kind of liked Harley Quinn's character just because she clearly had her own motivations for what she wanted to do. She was a clearly driven by this persona she had built up in her mind of the Joker, and that's what she was in love with, not Arthur Fleck, and that's what she wanted to keep alive. And as soon as that comes into question, she's done. So it's interesting, and as a driving force, didn't think it was a compelling driving force, partially because it's not relatable, but it was an interesting character.
I think my problem with Harley Quinn is that not so much that her as a side character has somewhat of her own reasons, despite the fact that they're not relatable, is that her interactions with the Joker are not they're not believable to the audience or relatable. And so side characters are there to drive the plot and the character along. And the thing is Arthur Fleck's character is the one that breaks down the entire movie, and so it kind of ruins the rest of the movie as well.
The only thing, so, and this is part of actually the obstacle that we're coming into right now, is that the whole question of the courtroom, which is around this whole love interest, is the situation of the courtroom, right? Going back to what the initial issue is Arthur Fleck insane with a multiple personality disorder, or is he a normal human being who just does malicious things, right? And the courtroom is trying to decide. And there's a weird sense in which there's confusion about what motive and reason and what the outcome ought to be in the courtroom from the protagonist perspective, in that they want a hearing of, it's almost like the lawyer that's helping Arthur Fleck wants everyone to believe that there is a split personality and the Joker is the one who committed these crimes. It's not clear what Arthur Fleck wants, but what it is clear is that there is a sense in which Harley Quinn, or Lee Quinzel, what she wants is it to be there is only one personality here, and it's the Joker. And that's the outcome they want. Now, that's technically the worst outcome for the Joker or Arthur Fleck, because that means that he gets convicted as this singularly minded dude who committed these terrible crimes. But that then solidifies their love in some way. It's not clear like what Arthur Fleck really wants in this situation and why he would want to go with Lee Quinzel's interpretation, other than to make her happy and keep her in this cohesive mindset that she is in love with this persona, that actually is who he is. So it's confused at best in regards to what the motives are for the entire courtroom.
My thoughts on the courtroom are, in a movie, there's an obstacle for the character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Arthur is, I guess, the protagonist, even though he's not a good guy. And so
well, protagonists don't have to be good guys. They just have to be the person trying to achieve a goal. So, yeah.
He's not your typical protagonist.
He's not a hero.
Yeah. And so the hindrance to him, well, you have to ask yourself, what is his goal in this movie? I guess it's to be with Harley Quinn. And right. So the hindrance to that is the court case. Now, the problem I had with the court case, the biggest one, is that you need to have a sense of danger that is built up throughout the movie. But for Arthur, there's no sense of like a threat at all when it comes to this court trial. There were multiple instances where it's like, oh, the death penalty's on the table, and he just kind of brushes it off. And so, as the audience, I don't feel like there's any threat or any sense of danger towards his character at all. Like, I'm pretty confident that he is going to get off at some point, which is why when, like, they are reading the verdict, it's like, oh, are they actually going to go through with this? And then the courtroom, there's a car bomb, and it's like, oh, yeah, clearly there was something that was going to happen. And so I think in terms of the obstacle, it was really poorly conveyed that there was an obstacle. Like, the court case was more of just like, it's just there. It's going to be out of the way soon. We don't need to worry about it at all. From both the Joker's character, from Lee's character, like, anyone in the asylum, it was like, there was no sense of urgency, like, this needed to be solved.
Right. What almost seemed like the courtroom existed solely to answer the question of, does Arthur Fleck have a split personality or not? It was not about convicting him of a crime or anything like that in particular. It was more to achieve an end for us as the audience than to achieve an end for the protagonist himself.
Yeah.
So, unfortunate because it adds to the confusion, but that's what we got. I will say, though, the courtroom setting, especially with Gary, was, ironically enough, one of the best scenes in the film because it was kind of funny.
It was funny in, like, a bad way, though. I was like, he pulls out this, like, southern accent, and I'm like, brother, what are you doing? This is not the Joker, and this is not Arthur Fleck. This is just racism towards midgets? What?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it was.
And they have, like, this
not...
emotional scene with the I forget his name, Gary. And it's like, oh, it's gonna do something, and then it does nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good. But we already knew that. We don't need to keep focusing on that. So, what are your thoughts on once they realize in the courtroom, he comes to the revelation that I am Arthur Fleck, and I have committed these crimes of my own volition. It was not a split personality, and he admits that in the courtroom, in addition to admitting that he also killed his mother in the previous film, which had not been accounted for in the courtroom previously.
Yeah.
So, what was your impression when they gave that revelation, and then the ensuing interactions with Lee Quinzel?
What the heck? Why? Like, he does it, and I'm just asking why. What drove him to go from, I want to be the Joker and paint my face and go crazy southern accent on everyone, to, I'm going to cry and be emotional for the next, 10, 20 minutes and be a sob story and admit to all these crimes and admit to killing my mother? Like, what? Like, the only thing we have in between that is the guards beating him up. But how does that make the Joker not the Joker anymore? I was just... That was the point in the movie where I went, what am I doing here? Like, I was sitting there going, okay, maybe there's something redeeming about this movie. Maybe there's going to be a twist at the end that's going to explain it all, and I'll actually like this movie. But no! The twist wasn't a twist at all. It was just further into the pit of despair and sorrow that I had wasted money and time on a useless movie.
Well, I mean, it that's so funny. I mean, it is a big revelation for the film. I think it was definitely a surprising revelation, and this is one of those points where it's like, theoretically, yes, you guys got points for me, but I can't even give you full points because you're destroying your own plot in the process of making this revelation. Because you just admitted by saying, oh, I made these choices of my own volition, that Arthur Fleck is not insane. Which means, for one, our whole discussion in the last podcast about Arthur Fleck's insanity is no longer valid, which means I was actually more right than you, even though we're both technically wrong. If you want to hear that argument, go back to the last podcast.
It's just a bad movie.
But yeah, no, but it wasn't worth winning that argument, because it literally destroyed everything. Like that admission then means that everything that he had built up to and stood for at this point is now gone, and it had been a lie. So it in some ways is just it's terrible. It's committing character suicide, and that's what happened. So, and that's also why he loses Lee Quinzel, because in this effort, he's trying to be his genuine self, right? Show Lee Quinzel, oh, this is who I am. But in the process of doing that, he detaches himself from the persona that she was truly in love with. And when she sees that, she goes, nope, I'm not interested in you anymore, and leaves him. And that's where he has this devastating mental, oh my goodness, what have I done? This is awful. My life is over, blah, 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 even though he escaped being convicted because he came out of an exploded building. And then he gets arrested again and thrown back into Arkham Asylum, even though his verdict had already been partially read out and was clearly convicted. I'm not sure why he seemed to just go back to jail after that situation.
That was stupid. They just undid the efforts of the entire movie by just sending him back to jail, and it's like, again, because he's the Joker.
Because. Well, then you get that thing at the end, though, where the other guy says, I wrote a joke, and he comes up to the Joker as he's about to see one of his friends outside and says, would you like to hear it? Blah, 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 something about people getting what they deserve, and then takes the shard of the mirror and stabs Arthur Fleck to death. Turns out this guy gives his little maniacal laugh and cuts his cheeks so he has the scars. Wow, I wonder who he's supposed to be. End of movie. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
I thought that it was a stupid move on the director's part because you spent 2 movies building up this character, Arthur Fleck, who dresses up like the Joker, shoots someone in the head, laughs like the Joker. His job is literally a clown. Granted, it's a different take. And then the end of the movie, pointless movie that it is, ends with someone else just shivving this guy, and now he's the Joker. Why did I watch these 2 movies?
Why? I mean, yeah, it definitely is a surprise twist ending, but it also, in some ways, like the other things, destroys the previous 2 movies because it's saying that the person that we followed as the Joker for the past 2 films was not the Joker at all. He was just a symbol of the Joker, or the inspiration, if you will, which I think maybe that aspect is somewhat interesting, right? The idea that the Joker was actually inspired by a predecessor who wasn't quite as insane, but who led the way for the real Joker and inspired him to become who he was. Whatever. I'm not going to read too much into it because it was literally the last 3 minutes of the film, but it was definitely a plot twist, and it definitely in some ways, although you could say, Andrew, right, that this in some ways redeems the Joker from the terrible interpretation we got because it's admitting that it's not a true interpretation of the Joker.
See, I thought about that. I'm going to be honest. The thing that irked me more than anything was at the beginning of that movie, that guy, the guy who ends up becoming the real Joker at the end, you see like 2-second shots of him, and it's focusing on him, and I looked at you in the theater, I was like, it's gonna do something with him, but I don't know what. And so I was waiting, I was like, oh, I don't know who this guy is supposed to be. But it was very clear that he was insane, because he like had a knife at one point, and like he was like licking his lips, and it's like, bro, what is this?
Yeah.
And then in the end, it's like, oh, well, he's the Joker. Why didn't we have 2 movies about him? Why is he in our asylum? What's going on? What is this garbage?
Right. I mean, once again, an interesting twist, and in some ways, if you like the background of the comic series, I'm sure he at least follows it more closely than the Joker we got in the past 2 films. But once again, you destroyed the entire film of the entire last two films by doing this with this new character. So,
I mean, to be fair, Maverick, anyone could follow the Joker more closely if you only showed them for like 2 seconds and all you showed was them stabbing someone and laughing about it.
well, yeah, and well, the other thing is that he's clearly insane versus this Joker you can now argue is not.
Which is stupid, but yes.
So, anyways, that's the film. Do you want to talk about themes? Anything that value this film tries to portray? The lasting impact of this film?
I think one thing that because I was trying to think when I'm filling out the form is like, what are the themes and messages of this film? Like, is one of the messages be yourself because that's what the Joker did? Clearly, that worked out for him. Is the message like the idea of nature versus nurture? I don't think so, because that's not really highlighted as much, if at all, in this movie. Is the theme sort of crap? Where was I going with this? The only theme that I could think of is like the be yourself one, which doesn't make a lot of sense with where that took Joker. Because oftentimes in a movie, if you're trying to portray a theme through a character, they go through this arc and they embrace this new idea or moral or ethic or character trait, and they are rewarded in the end for it, despite the struggles they go through.
Right.
But he embraces this being himself, and he gets stabbed to death, rejected by the woman he loved, and dies. The only other thing I could think outside of all of this is like the idea of, are they trying to humanize him? Which they definitely did, but I think was a bad move on their part.
Right. Well, especially because earlier in the film, they seem to be going off of this pass of, oh, he's insane. That's why he doesn't do X, Y, or Z. So, or at least that's the only interpretation I could reasonably come up with that would make sense for some of his actions previously in the film. So they're really toying with different ideas that they end up throwing out the window. But yeah, they definitely had some themes they were trying to convey, some level of responsibility for your actions, or definitely some idea of being yourself for the ones you love, or something like that. But yeah, the way they end it with the plot twist basically takes the themes and messages and turns them on their head and says, oh, these aren't really great, they're actually terrible. Don't be yourself. If you really want to try to interpret it based on the film, don't be yourself. Don't be inauthentic for the people you love, or don't take responsibility for your actions because it doesn't work out, or any number of those interpretations. It's the only way you can interpret it, because he fails in all the ways that would generally be perceived as good for doing the right thing, or quote unquote doing the right thing. Yeah, it's a mess. And I think that's one of the reasons why it fails as a film in the box office, is it's not clear what to take away from it, but anything that you can take away is simply not good. So, lasting impact, what are your thoughts on the future of the Joker films, or even the character of the Joker as it gets portrayed in the future?
We peaked at Heath Ledger. May he rest in peace.
I mean, there's no argument there.
Like, I think the thing is like they've tried to create these movies almost and I don't have any way of confirming this, but from what I like understand about the movies and what I've seen in the movie themselves is, and like what I've read and understand of people who go to see these movies is like Heath Ledger's Joker made the Joker a lot more popular of a character. He made him complex. He made him interesting. He gave him his own motivations. He wasn't necessarily relatable, but that was the point. He was this insane, chaotic actor who did things for reasons not even he understood. Right. He did it simply because he could. And so these movies were like, oh, the Joker's a popular character. Let's do another twist on him and talk about like mental health or something. But it didn't go anywhere. And so with how bad this movie's doing, I certainly hope they don't make another one. And if they do, they're probably going to make it about this new insane character, which is just going to be weird. And so I think it was like they had the start of something good, and it just kind of collapsed under itself.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that it will have a lasting impact. I mean, maybe it will impact, like, maybe they were thinking of making other movies about DC villains, kind of like how Marvel or Sony, I guess, has done with, like, the Kraven and the Venom movies and Morbius. But, I mean, if they did, I don't think they're going to be making any more now.
Uh-huh. You know, this had a lower box office bring in over the first weekend than Morbius did.
That is hilarious, but also believable, very believable. I watched Morbius. I couldn't get through like the last 5 minutes, but that was also because I didn't pay to go see it, and I wasn't in a super comfy chair. So I still, like, if you gave me the choice between watching Morbius and this movie over again, I would choose Morbius. If you gave me the choice between watching this and Star Wars Episode 9, I'd watch Star Wars Episode 9 again.
Wow. I mean, actually, probably same.
Because
bad.
it's funner to watch and make fun of.
Yeah. But in that case, you're also acknowledging that it's terrible. So,
Yeah.
there's that too. But I mean, I don't know. That's all I got. I don't think it's worth talking anymore about how terrible a film this is, because it is genuinely terrible. Would not recommend the watch. Would you change your rating now at this point?
I lower it.
I would, but I don't really have a reason beyond what we've already said, and those were already accounted for. So I'm going to leave it where it is. Terrible review. 3.4 for me, 1.4 for him. That is the pod. We will be back, as we always are, next week. See you all next time.